Afterdepolarization are oscillations in membrane potential that follow the primary depolarization or phase 0 of action potential. Afterdepolarization can be divided in two types, which includes delayed afterdepolarization or DAD and early afterdepolarization or EAD. For better understanding, let's briefly remind the action potential phases. Full overview of cardiac action potential phases you can find in description. You can skip it by using the time codes. Until stimulated, the resting potential of cardiac muscle cell remains stable at approximately minus 90 mV. This resting state is known as phase 4 of action potential. Following phase 4, 4 additional phases characterize depolarization and repolarization of the cell. When propagated impulse comes from the pacemaker, cell membrane becomes less negative, approximately minus 60 mV. This level of membrane potential is threshold for sodium channel activation, and phase 0, that is also known as depolarization, begins. So the voltage-dependent sodium channel provides the inward sodium current responsible for the 0 phase. A small fraction of total sodium current, however, persists during the Plato phase, that called late sodium current. Following rapid phase 0 or depolarization, that puts the membrane potential into the positive voltage range, a brief current of initial repolarization during phase 1 returns the membrane potential to approximately 0 mV. It is caused by a short-lasting outward potassium channel activation that generates ITO current. The next phase is phase 2, that is also known as Plato phase. This relatively long Plato phase of action potential is mediated by the balance between inward calcium current and outward potassium current. Calcium current flows through the special L-type calcium channels. Calcium entry proceeds in a more gradual fashion than initial influx of sodium in 0 phase. So the calcium channel's activation is slower and channels remain open much longer compared to the sodium channels. Outward potassium current is represented by activation of potassium slow channels. These potassium slow channels activate slowly following phase 0 depolarization and increases gradually during the action potential Plato phase. The current is called IKS, when S means slow. Current that is generated by potassium slow channel is small and may even be absent in normal ventricular myocardium, particularly at long cycle lengths. It assumes more importance as heart rate increases and during sympathetic stimulation. Now let's remain about small fraction of the total sodium current that provided the 0 phase, and which also persists during the Plato phase and called late sodium current. The next phase is phase 3 or repolarization, which are provided by different outward potassium currents. The first current that is responsible for termination of the action potential Plato phase is rapid potassium current. Rapid potassium channel activates relatively rapidly and maintains significant outward current during phase 3 of action potential. The current marks as IKR when R means rapid. Potassium slow outward channel are also active during the third phase of action potential. The last outward current that is involved in terminal part of repolarization is the inward rectifier potassium current, IK1. This channel can work in both outward and inward direction, which depends on the membrane potential value and action potential phase. But in the terminal part of repolarization, this channel provides the outward potassium current. There are two major exchangers which are working during the action potential. There are sodium-potassium pump and sodium-calcium exchanger. Let's start from sodium-potassium pump. The sodium-potassium pump moves 3 sodium ions out of the cell. in exchange for 2 potassium ions that is moving into the cell. This ion movement generates an outward IP current. It should be noted that these ion movements go against concentration gradient. Consequently means it requires the energy from ATP splitting. Another important exchanger is Sodium Calcium exchanger. During Sodium Calcium exchanger work, 3 sodium ions are exchanged for 1 calcium ion. This current can be outward during the positive membrane potential of initial repolarization phase or phase 1, when 3 sodium ions move out from the cell, in exchange for 1 calcium ion that moves into the cell. This mode of exchanger work for sodium efflux goes on very short period of time. This current also can be inward in case of more negative membrane potential during the later repolarization. When 1 calcium ion moves out from the cell, in exchange for 3 sodium ions that moves into the cell. Most of the time sodium calcium exchanger works in this calcium efflux direction. Let's come back to afterdepolarization. So, delayed afterdepolarizations not initiated until repolarization is complete or nearly complete, and therefore is called delayed. Early afterdepolarization manifested as an interruption in repolarization and therefore called an early afterdepolarization. When the early afterdepolarization is large enough, it can cause an action potential that goes before complete repolarization. This action potential is triggered in the sense that it is evoked by an early afterdepolarization, the occurrence of which is dependent on the preceding action potential. The first triggered action potential may also be followed by additional triggered action potentials, all occurring at less negative level of membrane potential because of incomplete repolarization. These triggered action potential that are induced by early afterdepolarization can be propagated from the site of origin and cause triggered arrhythmias. Together, early afterdepolarization and triggered action potential can be called early afterdepolarization triggered activity, which subsequently can cause arrhythmia. There are 4 components of early afterdepolarization triggered activity. The first one is critical lengthening of the time for action potential repolarization, or we can also call it conditioning phase. The second one is early afterdepolarization itself. The third one is the depolarization phase 0 of the triggered action potential that arises from the early afterdepolarization. And the last one is the propagation of subsequent action potential causing triggered arrhythmias. Early afterdepolarization are often, but not always, associated with the critical prolongation of time of action potential repolarization that lead to prolongation of action potential duration. Initially, early afterdepolarization occurs more readily in ventricular muscle and Purkinje cell, which have a prominent Plato phase and thus are longer duration action potential than those in atrial muscle cell, which have a short or absent Plato phase. During repolarization, there is a net flow of positive charges from inside the cell to outside that increases with time after action potential phase 0 and returns the membrane potential back to its original negative resting value. This net outward current flow actually consists of both outward currents and inward currents during the repolarization phases. A reduction in outward current, such as reduction of different type of potassium current, for example slow, rapid, or inward rectifier current, or an increasing inward current, such as increasing of calcium inward current or late sodium current, or a combination of both, slows repolarization and can lead to early afterdepolarization induced triggered activity. This changes occurs during the phase 2 and 3 of action potential. Most of repolarization of ventricular muscle occurs during the time interval from the end of the QRS complex to the end of the T wave, which is included in measurements of the QT interval on ECG. Therefore, prolongation of ventricular repolarization that causes early afterdepolarization is associated with lengthening of the QT interval and alteration of the characteristics of the T wave. This leads to long QT syndromes that are the most common clinical abnormalities, likely to be associated with the early afterdepolarization triggered arrhythmias. The second component of early afterdepolarization triggered activity is early afterdepolarization itself. There are few ionic mechanisms that causes directly the early afterdepolarization. The first is increased net inward current. The inward current can be calcium-sodium and calcium-sodium exchanger current. Let's start from the L-type calcium inward current. Normally, when repolarization is not prolonged, L-type calcium channel has two ways to inactivation. The first one is calcium-dependent mechanism that is related to the calcium concentration inside the cell. That means the more calcium inside the cell, the less active is L-type calcium channel, the less strong is inward calcium current. The second mechanism of L-type calcium channel inactivation is voltage-dependent inactivation, when L-type calcium channel inactivates as membrane repolarizes to a more negative level during the phase 3 of action potential. When repolarization time is prolonged, L-type calcium channel can partly recover from inactivation and continue to generate an inward calcium current. During prolonged repolarization, a level of intracellular calcium in subcercolemal space declines by uptake by sarcoplasmic reticulum and by extrusion from the cell by sodium calcium exchanger work. As a result, calcium-dependent mechanism of calcium channel inactivation is suppressed. That allows the L-type calcium channel to stay opened for a longer period of time. The voltage-dependent mechanism of L-type calcium channel inactivation is also impaired in case of prolongation of repolarization. Because when repolarization demands more time, it means negative movement of membrane potential during phase 3 becomes later than in normal condition. Therefore, negative level of membrane potential for calcium channel voltage-dependent inactivation occurs later than in normal condition. As a result, calcium channel again avoid inactivation. These changes augments inward calcium current flowing through the open L-type calcium channel late in Plato phase and lead to early depolarization of membrane that we call early afterdepolarization or EAD. If this augmented calcium current reaches the threshold and becomes regenerative, this calcium current causes phase 0 of triggered action potential during phase 2 and early phase 3 of action potential. As a result, early afterdepolarization causes triggered action potential that in its turn can provoke another triggered action potential that propagates to surround myocardial tissue and causes arrhythmias. Now let's talk about sodium calcium exchanger. Sodium calcium exchanger current is a source of another inward current that can be involved in both the conditioning phase, prolongation of action potential duration, and early afterdepolarization formation. Increased sodium calcium exchanger current can result if cytoplasmic calcium is elevated during the prolonged Plato phase, perhaps as a result of either sarcoplasmic reticulum calcium release caused by reactivation of L-type calcium channel that was mentioned before, or another cause of sarcoplasmic reticulum calcium release, for example, in case of heart failure. As a result, removing excess of calcium from the cell cytoplasm lead to entering the sodium ions inside the cell, and the sodium current may be large enough to contribute the early afterdepolarization. Thus sodium calcium exchanger and L-type calcium channel can act synergistically to cause early afterdepolarization in phase 2 and early phase 3. The sodium calcium exchanger may play more dominant role in early afterdepolarization formation in late phase 3, when the membrane potential is more negative than level of voltage-dependent calcium channel inactivation. Therefore, L-type calcium channel is inactive due to the voltage-dependent mechanism, but sodium calcium exchanger current becomes larger at this more negative level of membrane potential. As a result, sodium calcium exchanger inward current can be large enough to contribute early afterdepolarization. When the sodium calcium exchanger current reaches the minus 60 mV, voltage-dependent sodium channel begin to reactivate and can cause triggered action potential zero phase. Then in its turn can provoke additional triggered action potentials that can be propagated and causes arrhythmia. Sodium calcium exchanger current may also assume an important role in generated EAD during sympathetic stimulation, when sarcoplasmic reticulum calcium uptake and release is enhanced. As you already know that zero phase of triggered action potential can be calcium dependent and sodium dependent. The feature of this we will discuss according to the last component of early afterdepolarization triggered activity, propagation of triggered action potential. As you know, the EAD and subsequently triggered action potentials must propagate from their site of origin to surrounding myocardium for causing the arrhythmia. The level of membrane potential at which triggered action potential occur has an important influence on the ability to propagate. If the triggered action potential occurs in early phase 2, in this case, triggered action potential arising at low, less negative level of membrane potentials. Therefore, these action potentials have a very low amplitudes, depends on calcium inward current. They are unable to depolarize the surrounding myocardium to its threshold and therefore can't cause the arrhythmia. Especially it even not enough for calling the triggered action potential. They are just oscillations in membrane potential. When the early afterdepolarization and triggered action potential occurs in late phase 2 or early phase 3, it occurs at more negative level of membrane potential and have a larger amplitude and stronger depolarization phase 0 caused by inward calcium current. Now they are strong enough for propagation and depolarizing the surrounding myocardium to its threshold level and cause the arrhythmia. When the EAD occurs in late phase 3, it occurs at even more negative level of membrane potential than in late phase 2 and early phase 3. Therefore, they have a larger amplitude that is caused by sodium-related zero phase in triggered action potentials. And of course, they are able to depolarize surrounding myocardium to its threshold for causing the arrhythmias. The current arising from both late phase 2 and phase 3 triggered action potential that spreads from this EAD focus to depolarize the cell in the pathway of propagation is enhanced to ensure propagation when the triggered action potential of the critical number of cells is synchronized to occur simultaneously, thus summating the current from each cell. Synchronization is achieved by gap junction coupling among the cells. If the cells in the focus were not coupled to each other, early afterdepolarization would occur at random cell without synchronization, and propagation of an impulse away from the focus might not occur. Another feature that can impair propagation of early afterdepolarization is normal repolarization of surrounding cell. Normal repolarization of adjacent cell occurs more rapidly than in the region generating the early afterdepolarization. When this occurs, the early afterdepolarization focus is surrounded by the region with a more negative membrane potential at the time when the EAD occurs. Then, electrotonic currents flow through the gap junctions in the repolarizing direction from the surrounding regions to the focus of early afterdepolarization that would inhibit the EAD formation. It is therefore unlikely that early afterdepolarization triggered arrhythmias could arise in small region with a normal coupling to surrounding normal myocardium. Under situation in which early afterdepolarization triggered arrhythmias occur, there is a usually reduced repolarization reserve, that means a decrease in a component either of rapid or slow outward potassium currents. So, reduced repolarization reserve of surrounding myocytes prolonging their repolarization, or a reduced gap junction coupling, both of which reduce the inhibiting electrotonic current flow. If you like the content, press like, subscribe to our YouTube and Telegram channel, and have a good day!
Here we go!